Her car was found, her trail vanished, and the forest never gave her back. It was a cold February night in 2004. A young woman's car lies wrecked along a silent New Hampshire road. She speaks calmly to a passerby, declines help, and assures him AAA is on the way. Minutes later, by the time police arrive, she's gone. No footprints leading away, no phone call for help, just an empty car idling in the snow. Before the story leaves its car engine running and the snow falling on a stretch of road asking questions no one can answer, hit the like and follow button and turn on notifications, because sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens next. It's what never happens at all. This is episode 4, The Disappearance of Maura Murray. Maura Murray was 21, a dedicated nursing student at UMass Amherst, former West Point cadet, and an accomplished athlete. By all accounts, she was smart, driven, and caring, the kind of person who sent thank you cards and dreamt of helping others. But in the days leading up to her disappearance, something in Maura's life shifted. Friends and family would later learn of red flags, a breakdown at work, a brush with the law, and secret plans that Maura kept to herself. Thursday, February 5th, 2004, UMass Amherst, Maura was working her campus security job when a phone call reduced her to tears. A supervisor found her in a daze, only able to mutter, my sister, over and over. The exact trigger remains unknown. Maura's sister later said nothing major had happened between them that night. But that emotional collapse was a harbinger of turmoil beneath Maura's composed exterior. Saturday, February 7th, Maura's father, Fred Murray, came to Amherst to visit and help her shop for a used car. Maura's own older car was unreliable. It even had a habit of smoking, and Fred had shown her a trick to stuffing a rag in the tailpipe to reduce the smoke. That night, Maura borrowed her father's new Toyota to go to a dorm party. In the early hours of Sunday, around 3:30 a.m., she lost control and crashed into a guardrail, causing nearly $8,000 in damage. Police responded. Maura, fortunately, wasn't hurt, and no citation was issued. Still, she was devastated, sobbing to her father over the phone about the accident. Fred reassured her the insurance would cover it and told her to pick up accident report forms on Monday. Later that day, Maura went with Fred to get the damaged car towed and dropped him off at his motel. They made plans to talk Monday night about the insurance paperwork. Neither of them knew it would be the last time they'd see each other. Monday, February 9, 2004, the day of the disappearance, early that morning around 3:30 a.m., Maura emailed a homework assignment to a classmate group as if trying to tie up loose ends. By Monday afternoon, she set into motion a mysterious getaway. Maura emailed her professors and work supervisor, informing them she'd be away for a week due to family death. There was no death. It was a lie. She also sent a cheerful note to her long-distance boyfriend, Army Lieutenant Billy Roush, saying, I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking too much of anyone. I promised to call today. I love you more, stud. If Maura was upset or planning to leave school, she didn't let it show in that email's tone. Around 12:55 p.m., records show Maura made a 3-minute call to a condo owner in Bartlett, New Hampshire. It was a condominium where her family had vacationed in the past. Maura didn't end up reserving anything, and the owner later said she couldn't recall speaking with Maura that day. But the call suggests Maura was checking lodging in New Hampshire's White Mountains, a place she knew well from family trips. Shortly after, Maura also called 1-877-GO-STOW, a tourism line for Stowe, Vermont. That call lasted under a minute, and no reservation was made. The line may have been down. Maura seemed to be exploring options in the northern New England area. At 1:24 p.m., she emailed a note to her nursing professor saying she'd be out for a week due to a death in the family. She then packed her car, a black 1996 Saturn sedan, with clothes, textbooks, toiletries, and her favorite stuffed animal. She also quietly returned some borrowed clothes to a friend's dorm room that afternoon, as if methodically wrapping up campus loose ends. By 3:15 p.m., Maura was caught on camera at an ATM in Hadley, Massachusetts, withdrawing $280, almost all the money in her account. The surveillance still showed her alone, and nothing appeared unusual from there. She stopped at Liquors 44, a nearby liquor store, around 3:40 p.m. She bought about $40 worth of alcohol, a bottle of vodka, some Kahlua, Bailey's Irish Cream, and a box of Franzia wine. She also returned a stash of empty cans from a small cash refund, suggesting she was scrapping together every dollar she could. These purchases, especially the assortment of alcohol, would later fuel speculation. Was Maura planning to drink away her sorrows on a solo trip, meet up with friends for a getaway, or was it something more concerning? There was no way to know yet. Before leaving town, Maura stopped by the campus police station in Hadley around 4 p.m. to pick up accident report forms for the crash she had in her dad's car. Investigators later found those blank forms neatly in her Saturn, like a to-do item she hadn't gotten to yet. At 4:37 p.m., her cell phone records show the last known use. Maura listened to her voicemail. We don't know what messages she heard or who they were from, but after that, Maura's phone went silent. She made no more calls. By all indications, around 4:30 p.m., Maura Murray drove out of Amherst heading north. She told no one exactly where she was going or why. The drive from UMass Amherst up to the White Mountains of New Hampshire can take about 2.5 to 3 hours. That February evening, the roads would have been slick with winter ice and snow. Maura likely took Interstate 91 north through Vermont, then turned east towards New Hampshire's North Country. As daylight faded, she passed through small town and dark forest. We can only imagine what was on her mind during those solitary hours. Was she relieved to be leaving campus and recent troubles behind? Or anxious about what lay ahead? The secrets she carried with her recent legal trouble for credit card fraud, academic stress, the car accident, might have felt both heavy and strangely distant as the miles rolled by. At around 7:25 p.m. on February 9th, Maura's Saturn was seen navigating a sharp turn on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, a rural road winding through the White Mountain foothills. A local resident, Faith Westman, heard a loud thump outside her house and looked out the window. She saw a car off the road up against a snowbank. Faith dialed 911 at 7:27 p.m. to report the accident. Crucially, she described something unusual. From her window, she thought she saw a man smoking a cigarette inside and around the car. Later, her husband would dispute that, suggesting what Faith saw might have simply been the orange glow of the car's interior light, or the embers of something in the snow. But that initial report of a possible second person at the scene has never been conclusively resolved. Just minutes after the crash, a school bus driver named Butch Atwood was heading home along Route 112. He came upon the scene, a black Saturn sedan, nose damaged against the snow. A young woman stood by the car. Atwood recognized her from the description later. It was Maura. He pulled over his bus and asked if she needed help. Maura was calm and politely said no, she was fine. She'd already called AAA for a tow. But Atwood knew this area well, and her claim didn't sit right. There's virtually no cell phone reception in that mountain stretch of 112, something any local and likely Maura herself would know. Besides, Maura's phone records later showed she hadn't called for roadside help at all. Atwood noticed that Maura appeared shaken, but not visibly injured. She was shivering in the cold. He offered to let her wait in his warm bus or drive up the road to his house to call for help, but Maura politely refused every offer. She asked him please not to call the police. She had already alerted AAA, and help was on the way, she insisted. Atwood was unconvinced. The young woman seemed frightened, not of him, but Perhaps the situation or the idea of police coming. He didn't press her further. Instead, Butch Atwood drove the short distance up to his house, arriving around 7:42 p.m. and immediately called 911 to report the accident and the woman in need of help. On the phone, he described Maura and noted she appeared shook up, but not badly hurt. He could see the scene from his house, about 100 yards away, and he spoke to dispatch. He kept an eye out, watching the car from his porch. It was now around 7:43 p.m. and dark out. The blue glow of police sirens had not yet arrived, but he expected they would any minute. Back at the scene, within those critical minutes after 7 p.m., there were other developments. Another neighbor may have driven by a woman later dubbed Witness A, who claimed she saw a police SUV parked nose to nose with Maura's car around 7:35 p.m. This was perplexing because the official record shows that Haverhill police officer dispatched to the crash, Cecil Smith, didn't arrive until 7:45 p.m. If Witness A's account was true, it suggests there might have been another vehicle, possibly another police unit or a Good Samaritan with an SUV, at the scene briefly before leaving. However, this point remains hotly debated. Dispatch logs and Officer Smith's own statement place his arrival firmly at 7:45 to 7:46 p.m. with no other official vehicles present earlier. Could Witness A have mistaken about the timing or the vehicle's identity? Or was there truly another car, maybe a local resident's SUV, that stopped and left before police got there? The uncertainty adds an eerie wrinkle. Was someone else there with Maura in those final moments? What we know for certain is that by 7:46 p.m., Officer Cecil Smith reached the scene and found Maura's Saturn locked, its front end damaged from hitting a tree and no sign of the driver. The car's windshield was cracked and both airbags had deployed from the impact. Inside and outside the Saturn, Officer Smith discovered evidence of what had happened moments before. A spilled container of red wine, red stains splashed across the seats and doors, and a soda bottle that smelled of alcohol, perhaps wine mixed with soda. A box of Franzia wine, partially emptied, lay in the seat of the floor. Maura's belongings were scattered but intact. Clothes, textbooks, makeup, workout gear, CDs, and the printed directions to Burlington, Vermont that she'd downloaded were found in the car. Even Maura's favorite stuffed monkey was there, placed on the back seat, watching over a scene of sudden abandonment. Not found, however, were some critical items. Maura's cell phone, her wallet containing ID, credit, and debit cards were missing. To this day, none of those have ever been located or used. It appeared she had taken her phone and cards with her when she left, or someone else had them. Either way, there would be no electronic trail. The officer also noted something odd with the car's exhaust pipe. A rag was shoved into the tailpipe. Fred Murray later explained he had advised Maura to do that simply if her car started smoking badly. Perhaps the old Saturn was acting up on the drive, and Maura used the rag trick to keep it running a bit longer without drawing attention from police for smoke. Officer Smith radioed in this situation. Single car accident, female driver not on scene, believing Maura might have fled on foot to avoid trouble, maybe due to drinking and driving, given the wine evidence. Police initially treated it as a missing person who may not want to be found. Within minutes, backup arrived. EMTs and a fire truck were dispatched after Atwood's call detailed a young woman possibly in distress. They searched the area around the crash. The road was bordered by woods and a few houses. Fresh snow covered the ground, and Maura was starting to fall, blanketing the area in white. If Maura had walked into the forest, one would expect footprints, but responders saw none leading into the woods. The only set of footprints they found were some tracks around the Saturn itself, possibly Maura's steps pacing near the car, and then nothing. It was as if Maura had vanished into the frosty air. Authorities followed protocol. They checked both directions up and down the road, knocked on a couple of nearby doors, shouted Maura's name, no response. The neighbors hadn't seen her since the crash. One resident later said there were no tracks in the woods, so she had to have stayed on the road. The logic was chilling. If no one saw her on the road, perhaps she was picked up by a passing vehicle. Could Maura have willingly accepted a ride from someone after Atwood left? Or even more ominous, did someone forcefully take her at the moment no one knew? You know what's weird? Most of the stories we tell on Haunted in Between happen in the space where your mind is tired, your guard is down, and things feel just a little off. Late nights, long edits, too much silence. And if you're anything like me, caffeine becomes part of that routine. Here's the thing though, most energy drinks make me feel worse. Jittery, foggy, like my brain's racing but not actually focused, which is ironic when you're trying to tell stories that require focus. That's why I switched to W. W wasn't made by some massive corporation. It was made by a gamer who got sick of the junk. Sugars, dyes, big blends that do nothing but crash you later. W cuts all that out and uses coffee fruit extract, which helps with the mental focus without the sharp spike and drop. It becomes part of my late night routine, recording, researching, edits, staying present when the stories get dark. If you want to try it for yourself, you can use my promo code HauntedInBetween for 10% off at checkout. Let's get the dub. The link's in the description. Now let's get back into the story. By 8:30 p.m., roughly an hour after the accident, police officially cleared the scene. They had the Saturn towed and kept it as potential evidence. With no immediate signs of foul play and a good chance Maura was intoxicated and possibly trying to avoid a DUI, the urgency was lower than if it were a clear abduction. Officers figured she might turn up in the morning, perhaps after hitching a ride to somewhere to sober up. However, overnight temperatures dipped into the teens, and Maura was out there somewhere with no coat visible at the scene. She likely had one on and no gloves found. The White Mountains in February are unforgiving. If Maura was wandering outside, hypothermia could set in within hours. As midnight passed and Maura still hadn't showed up, the situation grew more troubling. By the following morning, Maura Murray was officially a missing person. A 21-year-old vanished without a trace in the span of minutes on a quiet rural road. And the baffling evidence left behind, a car with keys missing, a rag in the tailpipe, spilled wine, but no footprints, posed more questions than answers. The North Country woods had swallowed up another traveler, and it wasn't letting go of its secrets. The disappearance of Maura Murray sparked an immediate search and a decade-plus investigation that has frustrated law enforcement, and armchair detectives from around the world, and devastated her family. In the initial hours after Maura vanished, however, there was simple confusion and mounting concern. February 10, 2004, morning after, Maura's father Fred learned that his daughter's car had been found abandoned in New Hampshire. He hadn't even known she left campus. That morning, when Maura failed to show up for her shift or classes, UMass campus police contacted her family about the situation. By midday, Fred and Maura's older sister were en route to Haverhill, New Hampshire, desperate for answers. Local law enforcement initially theorized Maura might have been intoxicated and wandered off to avoid an arrest, or even that she staged her own disappearance to start a new life. This assumption would shape the crucial first days. According to Maura's family, police did not immediately treat the scene as a potential crime. In fact, the New Hampshire State Police and Haverhill Police waited 36 hours before conducting a thorough neighborhood canvass or roadblocks to ask if anyone had seen Maura or picked up a hitchhiker. In a missing persons case, those early hours are golden. Maura's father was furious. On February 11th, 2 days after Maura's disappeared, the search efforts scaled up. New Hampshire Fish and Game officers, state troopers, and local volunteers were mobilized. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras buzzed over the wooded mountains, scanning for any heat signatures of a person against the cold landscape. Tracking dogs were brought in to sniff out a trail. One canine followed Maura's scent from the driver's seat to the Saturn. Tracking dogs were brought in to sniff out a trail. One canine followed Maura's scent from the driver's seat of the Saturn down the road eastward, but only for about 100 yards before the trail abruptly stopped. The implications was chilling. It was as if Maura got in a vehicle or was picked up at that point, because the dog lost the trail on the roadside, not turning into the woods, not further down Route 112, just ending in the middle of the road. Search teams scoured a 2 to 3 mile radius around the crash site over the following days. They trudged through knee-deep snow with snowshoes, wading in fridge streams, and even used cadaver dogs trained to sniff for human remains in case the worst had happened. Nothing, no trace of Maura was found. Not a shred of clothing, no footprints, no dropped items. While officers' search continued through the week, Maura's family undertook their own desperate efforts. Fred Murray was soon joined by Maura's siblings and her boyfriend, Billy Roush, who flew up from Oklahoma. Billy's mother, Sharon Roush, also became heavily involved. The family plastered missing posters all over New Hampshire and Vermont. They visited local businesses, knocked on doors, and begged anyone with information to come forward. Leads began to trickle in, but each brought more questions. A contractor who lived down the road claimed he might have seen someone running alongside Route 112 later that night, but he wasn't certain. Another neighbor reported a flurry of activity by Maura's car, possibly a flashing light or movement that she glimpsed out of her window before police arrived. This was similar to what Faith Westman had described, the red glow or cigarette. Could it have been the light of a car's interior or another vehicle's headlights briefly as someone helped Maura? It remains ambiguous. One of the most tantalizing early tips came from outside the immediate area. Some people reported a young woman hitchhiking along a road several miles east towards the Connecticut River in the days after the crash. The description loosely matched Maura. There was also an unconfirmed report of a sighting at a convenience store the next town over, where a woman resembling Maura appeared disoriented. None of these could be substantiated. When investigators checked security cameras or followed up, the leads went cold. As days turned into weeks with no sign of Maura, major media outlets picked up the story. What began as a local missing person case now captured national attention. The combination of an attractive, successful young woman vanishing and the eerie circumstances birthed what some call the first internet true crime obsession of the social media age. Web sleuths forums lit up with theories. Bloggers dissected the timeline second by second, and reporters descended on Haverhill. Law enforcement, for their part, publicly maintained that they had no evidence of foul play. Early on, New Hampshire's lead investigator, Lieutenant John Skarzina, suggested Maura likely left of her own accord, possibly to escape issues in her life. He pointed to how she had packed up her dorm room before leaving campus, clothes off hangers, personal photos taken down, boxes filled, and left on her dorm bed, as if she didn't plan to return. Police even mentioned a note found in her dorm, allegedly a letter to her boyfriend expressing relationship problems. Billy Roush and his family denied any such note existed. Nevertheless, these details painted a picture of a young woman possibly preparing to run away or take a break from her current life. The Murray family, however, rejected the idea that Maura would just voluntarily disappear without a word. They knew Maura had made mistakes, the credit card incident, the crash, but they insisted she was not unstable or suicidal. Fred Murray believed from the start that Maura had come to harm. Somebody locally grabbed her, someone who knows the area. Fred's theory was that a local perpetrator, maybe a predator living nearby, saw Maura, whether by chance or by following her, and snatched her before police arrived. It's a scenario that explains the lack of footprints and the lost dog scent. Maura could have been picked up in a vehicle not long after Atwood left, perhaps even forced into it. The FBI was notified early in the case, but did not take over, treating it as a state matter. Fred Murray grew increasingly frustrated, and in May 2004, just 3 months in, he wrote to the governor of New Hampshire pleading for the FBI to be involved. He got no reply. Fred filled Freedom of Information Act requests and even sued the state of New Hampshire to obtain the case files in the years that followed. Most of those files remain sealed since it's an open investigation. The Attorney General's office has repeatedly said they welcome tips but have found no evidence Maura is alive and no solid evidence of a crime either. It's an investigation and purgatory. Every theory plausible, yet none provable. As spring 2004 arrived with thawing snow, one of Maura's sisters discovered something strange near the crash site. a ripped pair of women's white underwear on the snow, a few miles from where Maura vanished. For a moment, the family feared the worst. Could this be a clue that she met violence? The underwear were turned over to police. After testing, authorities stated the underwear did not belong to Maura and were unrelated. How they concluded that wasn't fully explained, but presumably by size or DNA. It was another morbid dead end and a sign of how, in the vacuum of answers, every piece of litter or rumor becomes a potential clue. Among the locals in Haverhill, rumors spread quickly. Some people whispered about a certain A-frame house up a gravel road less than a mile from the crash, where a couple of sketchy characters lived at the time. There were stories, never officially confirmed, that cadaver dogs brought near that house in 2004 had alerted to the possible presence of human remains, specifically hitting on a closet area. This was enough to set imaginations ablaze. Did something happen in that house? Was Maura alive or deceased, at one point hidden there? But without a warrant or concrete evidence, police couldn't just tear up a home. That fizzled when those residents wouldn't cooperate. The A-frame house would come back into play years later, but in 2004, it remained an unproven tip. Meanwhile, formal search efforts waned after about a week. The case then transitioned from search and rescue to an investigation phase. Detectives delved into Maura's background. They soon uncovered that Maura had legal troubles a few months prior in November 2003. She had been caught using stolen credit card numbers to order pizza. It was a college kid's misdeed. She was dealing with the charge through a diversion program, and it would be dismissed if she stayed out of trouble. It's unclear if this weighed on her or influenced her actions, but it painted a fuller picture. Maura was not as perfect as some early portrayals suggested. She had stresses, possibly money troubles, and was juggling a lot. West Point transfer, nursing program, relationship issues, etc. Investigators also learned about the breakdown Maura had Thursday before she vanished, and the accident with her father's car. To them, these hinted that Maura might have been emotionally overwhelmed and wanted to escape for a bit. Indeed, evidence from her UMass dorm suggested she packed in a way that implied she might not be back soon. Makeup, jewelry, and important papers were left behind. But she had stuffed clothes into boxes and suitcases, perhaps to take home or somewhere. To family, it looked like she planned to return after a brief trip, since she left many personal items in place. To police, it looked like she was closing a chapter. These contrasting interpretations fueled tension between the Murrays and law enforcement for years. Maura's case grew cold as 2004 turned to 2005. Every so often, a possible sighting would revive hope. A young woman at a bus station in Boston who looked like Maura, a tip that she was waitressing at a restaurant in Canada, even a blurry Facebook photo of a woman in Europe who resembled her. All were checked out, none panned out. In one instance, a man in Vermont was found to be impersonating an FBI agent, claiming he had information on Maura, which turned out false, showing how bizarre and tangled things got. The online community around Maura's mystery only grew, with forums analyzing everything from the liquor store footage, was anyone with her, to the crash scene's physics, was the accident staged. The case became a morbid puzzle people all over the world wanted to solve, but for those who knew and loved Maura, it was no game. In the shadows of this crazy true crime story is a family who deserves better. Journalist Sarah Tierney wrote, highlighting how the human side was sometimes lost in the sensational coverage. Maura's family struggled not only with her absence, but with the constant swirl of theories, some of which cast Maura in a bad light. Yet, the public interest also brought resources. In late 2004-2005, various private investigators volunteered time to help. Psychics chimed in, as they often do in high-profile disappearances. But nothing useful came of those leads. Law enforcement insisted they were still working the case. The New Hampshire League of Investigators, a volunteer group of retired law enforcement officers, took an interest as well. They, alongside the Murrays, family would periodically organize renewed searches of areas the official search might have missed. Remote ravines, abandoned buildings, even nearby bodies of water with dive teams. Each search ended like the last. No clues, only more frustration. One reoccurring theory the family and PIs explored was that Maura might have had a tandem driver. This is someone she knew following her in another car, perhaps a friend from UMass or elsewhere, who she had asked to travel together in case her old Saturn failed. If that were true, that person could have picked her up at the scene before police arrived. But extensive interviews with her friends and phone record analysts turned up no evidence that anyone else was on Maura's trip. Every friend, when questioned, seemed genuinely surprised to learn Maura had taken off to New Hampshire on a Monday afternoon in the middle of the semester. She confided her plans to no one, as far as anyone could tell. By 2005, the Maura Murray mystery had entered the lexicon of New England's strangest disappearance. It was often mentioned in the same breath as two other haunting cases. Brianna Maitland, a 17-year-old who vanished after her car was found crashed into an abandoned building in rural Vermont just months after Maura's disappearance, and Molly Bish, a 16-year-old lifeguard, abducted and murdered in Massachusetts in 2000. Some wondered if a serial offender was targeting young women in the region. However, police have found no evidence linking Maura's case to any other. Brianna's disappearance, though eerily similar in some surface ways, young woman, car found, no trace, victim, occurred 100 miles away and is believed to be unrelated. And Molly's killer is suspected to have been someone in her local area, again unconnected. The coincidences of location and timing kept the rumor mill churning, but nothing concrete tied these fates together. As the years passed with no signs of Maura, a few key figures emerged in trying to keep her story alive. One was a journalist named James Renner, who became obsessed with the case around 2011. Renner pursued a controversial theory that Maura might still be alive, having run away intentionally. Renner dug up some startling leads, including one that Maura might have been pregnant. There was a rumor of a search on her computer for pregnancy information and some odd details like birth control found in her dorm. But much of his speculation infuriated Maura's family. They felt he was more interested in sensational story than the truth. In 2016, Fred Murray wrote an open letter chastising Renner for causing the family pain with unproved claims. Still, Renner's effort brought more eyes to the case and highlighted curious facets that official investigators hadn't publicly discussed. He noted, for example, the possibility that Maura wasn't heading to the White Mountains along just to clear her head. Perhaps she was meeting someone there. But if so, who? That question lingers. The Attorney General's office insisted they had never stopped working on it. They periodically receive and check new tips. As of 2014, there has been no credible sighting of Maura since the night she disappeared. Every tip ended up a dead end or a case of mistaken identity. However, by the mid-2010s, new technology and a fresh set of eyes prompted authorities to conduct additional searches. 15 years had passed since Maura walked into the New Hampshire night. Fred Murray was now in his 70s, still driving up almost every weekend to search the area, still chasing every tip or whisper he heard in local bars. He tied blue ribbons on the trees along Route 112 to mark that his daughter had been there. Those ribbons became weathered and tattered over time, much like the Murray's family's patience and hope. Maura's mother, Lori, tragically passed away in 2009 from cancer, never knowing what happened to her youngest daughter. In her days, Lori said she was determined to beat her illness so she can see Maura come home. It was not to be. Despite the setbacks and passing years, Maura's case refuses to fade away. If anything, it had become almost legend. There's a kind of eerie folklore that has grown around Route 112. The original short script teased that local reported strange lights in the sky and unexplained sounds in the forest around the time of Maura's disappearance. While such tales are hard to verify, it's true that the White Mountains have long invited ghost stories and mysteries. Haverhill's stretch of road runs near the Wild River, whose cold waters have their own secrets. Some say on quiet winter nights you can hear echoes through the pines, perhaps just the wind, or perhaps something else. The area's reputation as a Bermuda Triangle of the North, where people go missing without explanation, has only been cemented by Maura's story and the fervent discussions online. Paranormal podcasts have speculated, did Maura stumble into a time slip or a parallel dimension on Route 112? Others, more grounded, wondered if one day a hiker will find a sign of her deep into the forest, or if she might reappear with an incredible story of survival and amnesia. As of now, these are all just narratives who create to fill a void of not knowing. One enduring image is especially haunting. Investigators noted that among the items recovered from Maura's car was a book titled Not Without Pearl, a true account of hikers who vanished or died on Mount Washington in New Hampshire's White Mountains. It's as if Maura's own journey was foreshadowed by that title. She loved hiking and knew the risk of those mountains. Did she intend to go hiking to clear her head, carrying that book for inspiration? If so, the peril became all too real. Her case was once called the first crime mystery of the social media age because interest exploded online, and that makes hiding harder. No verified sightings or financial trace like banks or tax records of Maura have surfaced. The FBI's VICAP list still has her as missing, and they even released an age progress photo of what she might look like today. The lack of contact with her family, whom she was very close to, is what Maura's loved ones cite in rejecting this theory. If Maura were alive, she would have called me, or one of her sisters, Fred insists. They cannot imagine her intentionally inflicting this kind of pain by staying silent so long. The Attorney General's office has strongly denied any misconduct or cover-up by authorities in the case, and there's no evidence suggesting it. Each theory has branches and nuances. For instance, some think Maura may have initially planned to come back after a week of clearing her head, but then succumbed to those elements. Or that she intended to meet up with an ex or someone secret, and that meeting turned disastrous. The truth could be something none of us fully anticipated, a bizarre accident or a chance encounter spiraling out of control. What keeps all these theories alive is that no hard evidence has ever emerged to conclusively support or debunk any of them. Maura's bank account saw no activity after she withdrew $280. Her cell phone never turned on again. It's as if her life froze in time on February 9, 2004. As a New Hampshire assistant AG said, while it's possible Maura's out there living under the radar, it's not very likely. Given everything, authorities lean towards the possibility that Maura died that night or not long after. They just don't know how. Route 112 in Haverhill has become a somber pilgrimage site for those captivated by Maura's story. True crime enthusiasts and citizen detectives travel there, especially in February, to the last known path of Maura Murray. They park by the wood line where a scraggly tree still bears marks of a collision and sometimes a blue ribbon tied in remembrance. They imagine the scene at dusk, the crumpled black Saturn, the hush of falling snow, the valley shadows creeping in. Some say the air itself feels heavy with unanswered questions, watching, listening. For Maura's family, each passing year is an agonizing cycle of hope and disappointment. On the anniversary, every February, they gather in New Hampshire to hold a vigil, keeping Maura's memory alive and urging anyone with information to break their silence. In 2020, in recognition of the case's significance, a proposal was made to install a historical landmark on Route 112 commemorating Maura's disappearance as a part of New Hampshire's history. Initially, it was controversial. Some felt it was ghoulishly or premature since the case isn't solved history. But to others, it was a symbol of how deeply the mystery had etched itself into cultural landscape. The marker was eventually approved in 2023, a green sign near the crash site that briefly tells the story of the mysterious disappearance of Maura Murray. It's a rare honor for a cold case and a testament to how Maura's story has touched so many. Yet, Maura is more than a case number or a mystery to be solved. Hearing her sister Julie speak, you're reminded that Maura was a real vibrant person, a loving jokester in a tightly knit family. Julie reminisces how Maura was thoughtful and humble, always spending little notes of gratitude to people. She was the kind of person who chose nursing as a career out of a genuine desire to help others. Over time, the media focus often shifts to Maura's troubles or the intrigue of her vanishing act, stripping away her humanity. In 2021, Julie and the family took action to reclaim Maura's narrative, launching their own podcast and advocacy efforts. For the first time, they told Maura's story in their own words, not as a curiosity or a speculate, but as a cherished sister and daughter who met with misfortune. This effort was refocused the lens. The goal is not to craft wild theories, but to find the truth about bringing Maura home. To this day, the official stance of law enforcement is that Maura's case remains open and active. As recently as 2022, digs and searches have been conducted on new tips. For instance, ground searches in nearby towns like Llandaff and Easton were done when a fresh lead emerged. The New Hampshire's Cold Case Unit and FBI periodically review the file. There's a standing $10,000 reward for information leading to Maura, put up by an anonymous donor years ago. And tipsters can always call the New Hampshire State Police or submit a tip to the FBI's VICAP division, where still lists Maura on their missing persons page. Someone somewhere might hold the missing piece of the puzzle. Perhaps a person who gave a ride to a hitchhiker that night and never realized who it was, or a witness who saw a suspicious vehicle or person around the area. Even the smallest detail could crack the case, which is why the Murray family and investigators implore the public not to assume the story is over. Maura's disappearance resonates deeply because it sits at the intersection of a nightmare and a mystery. On one hand, it's every family's worst fear. A loved one vanish abruptly and you're left in eternal limbo. No answers, no closure. On the other hand, it's a story that has all the elements of a novel. A secret journey, a crash on the lonely road, cryptic clues, and a host of possibilities. It's a mirror we hold up to ourselves, inviting us to project our own theories and bias. The simplest, most haunting questions remain. Why did she walk away? Why did Maura leave campus that day? And what was in her mind as she navigated into the mountains? Was she running from her problems, or running to something we know nothing about? In the absence of answers, what endures is the hope for a resolution. As Fred Murray has often said, I just want to know what happened. I want my daughter back. Short of Maura walking through the door, the greatest wish is to find her, whatever remains or evidence, so that the family can truly lay her to rest, and the wheels of justice, if warranted, can turn. The woods along Route 112 stand silent, keeping their secrets as seasons cycle from harsh winter to gentle summers and back again. Somewhere in those wilds, or perhaps far beyond them, lies the answers to the riddle of Maura Murray. Despite exhaustive searches and worldwide attention, that answer has eluded everyone. But the search isn't truly over. Every year brings new technology like better DNA testing and wider databases for unidentified remains, giving fresh ways to check against Maura's profile. The family's determination combined with the public's means this story isn't forgotten, not by a long shot. One day, a hiker might stumble on a clue, or someone with a guilty conscience might speak up. Until then, Route 112 carries the weight of an unsolved sorrow, a reminder that in the blink of an eye, a life can become a mystery. What do you think happened on that snowy February night? Did Maura choose to disappear, slipping into a new life under a new name? Did she fall victim to the freezing wilderness she loved, or to a darker fate at the hands of a stranger? Perhaps you lean towards the tandem driver theory. The theories are endless, and we want to hear your thoughts. Share your ideas or even personal stories of visiting the site. Sometimes a fresh perspective is all it takes to crack a cold case. Most importantly, if you have any information at all that could help solve what happened to Maura Murray, no matter how minor it seems, please contact the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit or submit an anonymous tip to the FBI. 21 years is far too long for a family to wait for answers. Don't forget to follow Haunted in Between for more deep dives into true crime mysteries, eerie legends, and the thin veil between this world and the unknown. Next episode, we travel back to 1922 to a remote German farm where 6 people were brutally with a mattock. No signs of forced entry, no clear motive, and chilling evidence. The killer might have lived in the house for days after the massacre. That's right, we're unpacking unsolved enigma of Hinterkaifeck. You won't want to miss it. As always, we are the Haunted in Between. Remember, you're not alone. You're in between.